Hello, I'm John Deere and welcome back to Living Nonviolence, and this is the fifth of our 6 videos for our 6-week class. I hope you're finding this all helpful. This week I want to reflect with you on that third attribute of nonviolence from my book, The Nonviolent Life, joining and supporting the global grassroots movements of nonviolence for justice and peace. But as I've been saying, we want to be nonviolent to ourselves. We want to be nonviolent toward all others and all creatures and all creations. But third, we also want to be part of the global grassroots movement of nonviolence and to work for justice and disarmament and peace and for the earth itself for the rest of our lives. So I want to say a few words about how nonviolent change happens in the world and the movements in our own recent history and becoming activists, social change agents like Gandhi and Dr. King. So the way positive, nonviolent social change happens through history, I submit, is through grassroots bottom-up movements. In the last few centuries alone, the best changes happened because of nonviolent grassroots movement. Think of it, the abolitionists, the suffragists, the labor movement, the civil rights movement, the anti-Vietnam War movement, and then the feminist movement and the environmental movement, and now there's hundreds and hundreds of movements around the world. Justice and peace comes when we as ordinary people organize, agitate, speak out, and struggle together for change through people power movements. So my friend Reverend Jim Lawson, he defines nonviolence as power. Nonviolence is power, he says. Gandhi says nonviolence is more powerful than all the weapons of the world combined. It's an incredible statement. And that when we organize it as a power and a methodology, when you get thousands and then millions of ordinary people demanding nonviolent justice and peace and change, it becomes contagious and changes the world. And that Gandhi said we're just beginning to tap into this power of organized nonviolence. So we practice nonviolence personally and interpersonally, but we also want to join and organize and be part of these grassroots movements for justice and peace for the rest of our lives. That's what Gandhi did, and he and his people got the British to leave India. And that's what Dr. King and the civil rights movement did, getting the end of segregation. In the last 35 years, there have been at least 85 nonviolent revolutions, real dramatic change, but through the method of nonviolence. Some say 2/3 of the human race are now personally engaged and involved in grassroots struggles. So it's actually a very exciting time to be alive. There's so much violence, but on the other hand, people across the world are waking up to the power of active nonviolence and using it and discovering that it works. Here are just some recent changes made through organized nonviolent movements, and there's lots of history books coming out, but here are some to get this for you to think about. The end of the Vietnam War, I would submit. The fall of the Berlin Wall, the end of communism, the breakup of the USSR, the release of Mandela from prison, the end of apartheid, the election of Mandela as the president of South Africa, the people power movement in the Philippines, which got the dictator Marcos to leave in 3 days after 1 million people took to the streets in Manila, the singing revolution of Estonia, which was incredible, the Ukrainian revolution, the Burmese movement with Aung San Suu Kyi, the amazing revolution of nonviolent women in Liberia, led by Lima Gaboe, who then later won the Nobel Peace Prize, which ended the deadly dictatorship of Charles Taylor. The whole Occupy movement against Wall Street greed, and the Arab Spring, and the millions who marched against poverty in Brazil, and the millions who continue to march and organize against catastrophic climate change. And then there's February 12, 2003. The single greatest day of protest in human history, when we documented and know 12 million people marched in over 620 cities on every continent to protest a war that hadn't even happened yet. This is very powerful. I urge you to study the history of nonviolent social change, how it's been tried when it's organized, and how it works when it's tried. But a new book has just come out which proves systematically that nonviolence, when it's organized as a method of social change, works. The book is called Why Civil Resistance Works by my friend Professor Erica Chenoweth and Maria Stefan. They use statistical analysis to show how over the last century, in over 350 cases of nonviolent movements, They were far better at mobilizing supporters, resisting regimes and their crackdowns, creating new people power initiatives, and then defeating repressive regimes and establishing new lasting democracies. It's just evidence now, statistical analysis. I think the book should be read by the whole world. And if we did, we'd all reject war and violence as a methodology to resolve violence, and we'd fund and institutionalize nonviolent conflict resolution, which is what Gandhi said we have to do eventually. I really recommend it. You can also watch Erica Chenoweth's great talk on our YouTube video from the Campaign Nonviolence National Conference in August 2015. Here's a quote from Cesar Chavez, which I like. "We can change the world if we do it nonviolently. We just have to show people how they can organize through nonviolence, and when we do that, we can't fail. Nonviolence has never failed when it's been tried." So that means I think we all have to become activists and do our part, our little bit, to help build and spread the nonviolent movements for justice and peace and for the earth. I think each one of us has to get involved to some degree and do what we can to promote justice and peace. I don't think being peaceful and being nonviolent just means sitting back and doing nothing. I think it means entering the fray and joining the struggle and facing the obstacles and getting involved in the difficulties and trying to mobilize people. And what happens is people are going to get mad at you because you're speaking out and working for justice and peace, and then you get to be nonviolent. You really get to see how nonviolent you really are and how much more nonviolent you have to become. We can't just try to be peaceful in our personal lives and do nothing about the world of violence and permanent warfare around us. Nor can we just practice nonviolence toward those around us who are nice to us, and ignore everybody else or the millions who are suffering, around the world. We need to get involved in our peace and nonviolence and try to reach that level of holistic, mature nonviolence taught by Jesus and embodied by Gandhi and Dr. King and Dorothy Day and so many others. I once asked Cesar Chavez, the head of the farm workers, to me one of the great teachers of nonviolence, what should I tell people if they ever asked my advice? And without missing a beat, Cesar Chavez said to me, from now on, tell everyone you meet to engage in public action, public action, public action. He started beating his fist. He said it 3 times. Public action, public action, public action for justice and peace. So there you go. I also really remember and like the teaching of Archbishop Oscar Romero of El Salvador. Just an hour before he was killed in 1980, he said this, "No one can do everything, but everyone can do something." And I find that very wise and very helpful. It's actually very liberating. We don't have to do everything, but we sure have to do something. And everyone can do something for the world. Every one of us is needed. Every one of us has a talent and a gift to offer. Every one of us can help the global movement. Every one of us can make a difference. I think actually every one of us could be Rosa Parks. That tipping point that could make the movement become contagious. Then the good news is we don't have to do everything. All we have to do is our something. But it's incredibly important that each one of us do what we can. So if you're not involved in anything, I recommend picking one cause. Something that's close to your heart, the environment or the homeless, whatever. And getting involved in that struggle and advocating, getting to know local people working with it, getting involved in a local group with all your energy and goodwill. And discover how all the issues are connected so that whatever issue you're working on, you are connected to the global struggle for peace and justice. Really, there's a billion ways to work for justice and disarmament and creation. You can join local and national projects and struggles against any one of these issues, U.S. war making, nuclear weapons, climate change, extreme poverty, to the death penalty and torture, racism or sexism or handgun violence or drone warfare or homelessness or global hunger or any of the other forms of violence. But the thing is, if everyone gets involved and does their bit, the grassroots movement will grow. And then it becomes contagious. And eventually it can wear down the most entrenched structure of violence and empire. That's how change happens. I actually believe that's how the way the God of peace works among us through history. The good news is we are not powerless. We have a power. Martin King said that every day, a methodology, a way to change the world if we dare join the struggle and get involved. We all have to do our part. So I have 3 questions for you. First, when have you seen the power of active nonviolence at work in your life? In what nonviolent movements and actions that you participated in or you witnessed historically? Second, where do you see the hope and power of active nonviolence working in the world today? And third, what global grassroots movement of nonviolence are you part of or can you join? And how can you deepen your involvement with the grassroots movement? In other words, what new nonviolent public action can you take for justice and disarmament in the earth? Thank you very much. Send in your comments and questions by Wednesday, and maybe at the end of the week, add a little reflection or a journal entry to the class discussion board. God bless you and peace be with you.